So, I must admit, when we headed for Kyrgyzstan 12 months later, it was with a certain amount of trepidation. Coming from Australia, it's a good idea to combine a few events to make the airfare worthwhile. Initially we enjoyed a cruise from Copenhagen to the top of Norway, then a bus trip through Turkey. Next we embarked on a long and uncomfortable flight to Almaty in Kazakhstan. The flight convinced me that the locals must eat a lot of beans and cabbage.
We travelled on a small bus for the trip into Kyrgyzstan. It was a very long day with a border crossing from hell. That was until we paid the additional undocumented fee. We arrived quite late at a small boutique hotel in Kyrgyzstan. We found the accommodation excellent. The meals were different but very good. I don't know a lot about mechanics, but when I saw the workshop, the condition of the bikes and the funny angles that the bikes, sidecars and wheels were at, I had a feeling these were not very good motorcycles. Graham was talking uncomfortably something about camber and caster angles.
It took most of the first day to get the bikes to what we considered a vaguely acceptable standard to ride. There were 5 of us on the ride, Julie and I, Kenny from America and Peter and Gillian from England. It was interesting to watch the passing parade of residents going about their daily activities. We were definitely not in Australia. An early start from the hotel took us along a series of dirt roads and goat tracks to our first night's camp. There were a number of breakdowns along the way, and we learnt that any time there was a steeper incline it was necessary to get off and push the bikes. Worn-out 650cc engines running on low-grade fuel with an overloaded bike was not a good combination. The adventure was about to start. We will now introduce you to the full crew for our unique and somewhat rugged Ural tour through Kyrgyzstan.
Alenka was our interpreter. She had no understanding of time or distance, and her English left a lot to be desired.
Sergei was the team leader. He did his best, but the constant failure of the motorcycles made his job very hard.
I'm not sure what qualifications our doctor possessed, but seemed to lack the knowledge or equipment when called upon.
Seeing the state of the bikes and organization in the workshop displays an accurate profile of the mechanic.
And the last of our support crew was a sweet young girl who, like the rest of the support crew, except Alenka, could speak no English. Gillian from England was very quiet and great company, and, contrary to the photo, was not into heavy drinking.
Peter, Gillian's partner, was a tank captain in the British Army, a really good, solid, level-headed bloke to have along. Julie is my long-suffering wife, and has been coerced through many a strange adventure across the globe.
Kenny was from the USA, and worked in security at the White House. Another well-qualified member of our tour. And this is my husband Graham, who embraces the words of Helen Keller. Life is either a daring adventure, or nothing.
This was our 3rd day in Kyrgyzstan, and the morning ride was very pleasant, albeit a few breakdowns. We were always on the lookout for animals and the square holes in the tarmac. We later discovered that squares of tar were cut out of the roads and melted to mend the roofs of the houses.
All the bikes left the bottom of the pass together. Only Graham and I arrived at the top. We had passed through snow on the way up. It was getting late in the afternoon and very cold. Kenny arrived about 30 minutes later, having had a breakdown part way up. We waited another hour, but the others didn't arrive. It was just getting too cold. We needed to find shelter for the night. All our sleeping bags were on Peter and Jillian's bike. This had the potential to become quite dangerous.
We had no choice but to ride on. We passed a couple of herders' yurts, then eventually decided we had to stop and ask for shelter. Kenny was sure, if we stayed the night, we would get our throats cut. That would have been a preferred option compared to freezing to death.
It was just before dark when the rest of the team turned up. We continued riding. Following a dramatic night, we finally settled in a warm yurt at 2 a.m. This would be our home for the next 2 days.
Our hosts at this stop were excellent, the food was good, and the cow dung-fired heater made for a warm night's sleep in the yurts. Peter and Jillian spent the 2 days alternating between their beds and the toilet. It was not pretty. We set about enjoying the 2 days at Songkul. It really was a beautiful place. It gave the mechanic time to do some basic maintenance on the bikes. Check out the photos. There were horses available to rent for just $4 an hour. I can't resist a bargain, so, for the first time in my life, I hopped on a horse. Julie had ridden in her teens and seemed to drop back into it naturally. I managed the hour, but it was a particularly nervous hour. We were lucky enough to be at the camp as they practiced for an upcoming Buzkashi tournament.
Meals at the camp were excellent, and appeared to be mostly made locally from their own resources.
We had gone up the mountain and now had to go down. It was a narrow, rutted, steep track, dangerous by any standards. I should mention that, at this time, we still had a front and back brake, although rather ineffective. Peter had no brakes at all and slid the bike sideways to slow or stop the machine.
Out of the mountains and down onto the plains we had a good day's riding. Fuel was always a problem, we all carried an extra 20 liters. Fuel outlets always had a good supply of vodka but not necessarily petrol. At one stop they appeared to calculate costs with an abacus. We must have seemed important as we were greeted in one town by the mayor.
After lunch in the restaurant I made a fatal mistake. Amongst seasoned travelers there is a well-known saying, "Never fart in a third world country." There is a link below to a short story detailing a less than memorable part of my adventure.
As the day progressed we traveled on through rain and a very wet river crossing. Chapter 2 will be in production shortly. There we will tell you about the exploration of Tash Rabat, landmines, our front brake disintegration, a naked romp across a paddock, an unexpected desire to drink vodka, and the lesson learned from eating fried chicken from a roadside stall in Kyrgyzstan.